Hey, hello. In this video, it's a little bit different to what I've made before because I took my little camera into foundation with me and I basically just filmed what I was up to for a whole week, and this is just, I compiled it all together into this video. Because when I was making this video, I was just at the end of my, we call it kind of like a mini major project. It's the project that you do before your big final project at the end of the year. So this is all the work I was doing throughout the week, and what you'll see throughout this video is me making my final piece. So these are all the pages which lead up to it. So you can see I'm basing it around the Australian bushfires because it's something that I feel very passionate about, and I wanted to bring awareness to the situation by making kind of like a zine. If you don't know what a zine is, it's basically like a small version of a magazine with not as many pages. So my final piece was kind of split up into 3 illustrations just because the size of the paper I was working on, because I'm using watercolour paper, was quite small, so I split it up into 3, and then later on I joined them together in Photoshop to make them one big long illustration. But this first one is starting before the fire starts, although in the corner you can kind of see it. You can't really see it now, but you will later on. I start adding a bit of red just to imply that the fire is on its way. And I wanted to show the juxtaposition, fancy word, between the koala now, all happy in the lovely forest. Would you call it a forest or the lovely bush? I don't know. Full of leaves and trees, and then how when the fire comes in, and you'll see, honestly, the illustration that I do later on in this video, it breaks my heart, and I can't believe that I've drawn something that looks so sad, but it's okay because it has a happy ending, because the koala gets rescued, because, well, this whole thing is to promote a charity. The charity is called Wires Wildlife Rescue, and they rescue the wildlife, and they've been rescuing all the animals in the fire, so very, very good charity. So this was a promotion for that. In my head I was imagining it would be like a little leaflet that they give out to promote the charity. As far as what I'm doing here, I'm using acrylic paint and coloured pencils. I do the background in acrylic paint, and you'll see sometimes I water down my acrylic because then it dries and it gives like this textured look because it's kind of see-through and it lets the colour underneath poke through. And then after I've done that, I work into it in coloured pencils, putting the trees in, drawing around the leaves, just adding a little bit of details. When I first started this project, my theme, I guess, was pattern and texture. That was how this project started, and then from that it grew into the idea of the whole Australia bushfires as something to base my work on. But I always had to keep in mind that I wanted my illustration to have a lot of pattern and texture because that was my theme. So hopefully I achieved that. I think I achieved it, especially with the texture. You can see, but because of the watercolour paper, it's quite bumpy. So when I was drawing on top of, also, look at that. Is that not just the most satisfying thing you've ever seen? Wow, look at that. It's so nice. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, I tried to create texture because the watercolour paper is quite bumpy, so when I was drawing on top of it with the pencil, it created quite a textured look, which I also thought worked quite well with the trees because it kind of created the look of like bark. Which I was a fan of. And also when I was painting the backgrounds, I made it quite messy with the watered down paint, so you could you can see it. It's got a little bit of something to it. It's not all flat, boring. It's got texture, which I am a big fan of. I like my texture, I do. So moving on to the koala, I'm doing it in watercolours. The reason I'm doing it in watercolours and not acrylic paint like the rest is because I felt like it created the effect of fur quite nicely. It had quite a delicate look, and by doing the koala in a different media to the background, I feel it kind of made him pop out and stand out a little bit more. And then I just went over him in some plain old pencils to give him a bit of an outline, and that's that one. Tuesday. Moving on to the third illustration. Oh wait, no, you dozy duck. Second illustration. Now in this one, the fire, it's started to happen. It's kind of in full force. So for the background for this, I started with a reddish kind of pink tone. For the background I used, I don't really know what it was, I just found it in a bottle. I think it's ink, but it's a very, very vibrant sort of reddish pink tone. And then in parts I added white acrylic paint just to make the background, you can see it's got like bits of white in it, just to vary it up a bit so it wasn't too flat. And because the fire's just started, I still wanted there to be quite a bit of green in there, as this is kind of like the transitional illustration between there being fully green and fully red. So this was a mix of the green and the red. So it's basically just the same technique for all these illustrations. I do the background, get that to a sort of place where I like it with the acrylic paint, and then work on top of it with the coloured pencils. Oh, I forgot to mention, I also used watercolour pencils in certain parts and then went on top of it with water, kind of water it down, obviously. So yeah, I use them as well. The pencils I use are called Faber-Castell Polychromos, something like that. I think they're very good pencils, I like them a lot. The acrylic paints I used, I'm not really sure what they are because they were just the ones at college. They were quite good actually because, well, I think they worked well because they weren't the best, most highest quality paints, which was good for what I was doing because they were quite thin paints, meaning it was quite see-through, so you could see the colours poking through, making texture, which was good and a bonus because what am I trying to do? I'm trying to make texture and also patterns, but we'll get onto the patterns later on. Now for a brief intermission of me doing my illustrations, I thought I would introduce a new sort of segment to my channel. It's very, very new for me, called Eleanor's Corner. Eleanor lives round the corner from me. She's my very lovely friend. She's my best friend. And she's also very good at art, so I thought it'd be interesting for you to see what she was up to this week, because everyone in Foundation's up to completely different things. So here's a little bit of a book. She was creating characters inspired by pictures she took of nature, so there you can see them cute little guys, and from that she was looking at animation and then especially animating with paper, so she came up with this little character, acorn sort of character thing, and she made it all out of paper and she came up with backgrounds for it. And here's where she was making the animation, and it was so cute because the little puppet, you could change its face and make it look in different directions, and its arms moved and everything, and its legs moved. So if you want to see the final animation that she made, it's on her Instagram, and I'll link her Instagram in the description. She's called Ellie Artworks, and I think she's very good and she deserves a lot more followers, so can we please show Eleanor some love and respect because she's lovely. Anyway, Wednesday, moving on to my final illustration. There you can see that's my mock piece actually on the wall there. I mapped it all out and just plonked in colours to get a feel for what the colour palette would look like, so when I was actually painting it, it'd be easier, so I wouldn't have to be worrying about what colours to use. So for this final illustration, it's kind of split into two segments. On the left hand side is in the peak of the fire when it's at its worst, and the koala is at its most vulnerable, and then on the right hand side of the illustration, the green side is once the koala has been rescued. So on the red side, you can see at the bottom the hands are reaching in, and honestly the koala, it breaks my heart because look how sad it looks, but it's okay because the hands are reaching in and it's getting rescued and it's getting taken to a much safer place. So it's a happy ending for Mr. Koala. So because I wanted this to be the peak of the fire, the background was much redder than in the previous illustration, which had more of a pinkish tone to it. And the trees are more angular and broken, and just in general it looks a lot more dangerous. I've also used a lot of scribbly marks to suggest the fire as well. So this is the green side of the illustration, and it's very similar to the first one I did before the fire started, so it's kind of just the same technique for that. And then you can see the subtle use of pattern, because of course pattern and texture is what I'm doing. So I've used it just to kind of imply the fire because I didn't really want to paint fire. I wanted to just suggest it through the colours and through the pattern. And I used a lot of scribbly marks to show, kind of imply the smoke. Oh, and if you're wondering why these random chunks of the illustration are just white, so you can see at the top corner there was just a bit of the illustration missing, it's because later on I plonk it into Photoshop and I put writing in the white bits to kind of tell the story. To tell what the fires are about and talk about the charity a little bit, because like I said in the beginning, this is to promote a charity. Oh, look at his little face, he's so happy to be rescued. I love that little koala at the end, he makes me smile. And then that little one up in the trees hiding, he's a cute little guy. So yeah, that's the final illustration. And then on Thursday, because it's missing, I was just on Photoshop all day putting all the illustrations together. And here you can see my book work, which I did on Friday, just getting it presented in the book and doing a bit of annotation and showing all the progress shots. And you will see in a second my final piece, which is my little zine. It's like it has the separate pages, so you can look at the illustrations one by one, but then it folds out kind of like an accordion, so you can see the whole thing as one. Wow, honestly, I'm so happy with this. I think it's one of the best illustrations I've done. Also, when I was working on it on Photoshop, I added a few stars as well, just because I liked the look of it. And then for the back, it was quite simple. I just kind of did the logo of the charity and put some contact information and all that, and there you go. I hope you like this video. I am very proud of the fact that I managed to speak for almost 11 minutes, because I don't usually make videos this long. So I hope you like this video. Thank you very, very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Goodbye.